Right,
what
right,
we're doing.
right.
And
And
it's like,
you correlate
that's
it to also that the value of a human is their net worth.
right.
It's like the same thing.
Yeah,
We're just reducing us down to all beings down to these commodities, these things. So that let's go there. Let's talk about how we got here. And
right.
yeah, I'm really interested in having that conversation about your thoughts on how we got to this materialism place and the hurting and where we
Right.
might have come from. Yeah.
Yeah, just yeah, briefly, it's actually relatively straightforward and simple. When we just go back in history a little bit, like 10,000 years ago, we can see that there was no herding of animals before that. That's really started happening in what is today in the sort of in the Middle East, the Fertile Crescent area, what is today Iraq. And around that area, people started to own wild sheep and then wild goats, and about 2,000 years later, wild cows. And that was, I call it the herding revolution. It changed our relationship with nature and with animals in a profound way, because it's one thing to be growing plants and gardening or to be occasionally hunting free living animals. But when you start to own them and then breed them and then kill them, it's like the respect we have for those animals just plummets, because they're just commodity objects and property. And so we don't, if we're going to kill them, we have to just look at them as something way below us. And so the natural feeling that human beings, I'm sure, always had of respecting animals as mysterious and powerful cohabitants of the earth with us, it got destroyed really by herderism, because animals are reduced to either property objects or to pests. They might interfere with my property. And so then gradually, over thousands of years, gradually a wealthy elite class emerged that was wealthy because they owned the most livestock, and livestock were wealth. The word capita, which means head, in Latin, capital, we get our word capitalism, refers to the fact that animals were wealth. The more head of cattle you had, the more capital you had. And then these wealthy herders, we call them the kings in the Old Testament, or in the Epic of Gilgamesh, or the ancient Greek tragedies, all these books that go way back. We have these kings, and then they're wealthy and powerful because they own capital, which is livestock, but then they're always trying to increase their wealth. And so we have this ancient word gavya in Sanskrit, which means war. And it literally means the desire for more cows. And so war developed as an institution, which is still with us today. And it developed as an institution to increase the power and wealth of the elite, which is still what it is today.
Yeah.
And war led to not only more power and wealth for the kings, the wealthy elite, but also led to directly to slavery, because it's a small step from doing to animals to then doing the same thing to human beings. And I've noticed in my research over the years that actually everything that we've done to animals, sooner or later, we've done it to each other, because we are animals ourselves. So if you buy and sell them, pretty soon we're making money buying and selling human beings, right? The same way we do animals, and breeding the human beings. And the more you can breed them, the more slaves you have. You can sell the slaves, make more money. So that we had the whole slave trade coming out of slavery of animal agriculture. And then, of course, that led to part of that was the domination of women and the exploitation of women, because the whole core of animal agriculture is seeing the female animal as something to be used sexually. That's what it is. You couldn't have animal agriculture without breeding these animals, which means force impregnating female animals against their will and stealing their babies. That's the foundation of our entire society. It's the sexual abuse of females. That's it. That's the core, because that's the core of herderism, herding animals. And so that requires not only women to be seen as chattel property, which they were by a few thousand years later, they're bought and sold like cows and sheep, but also it harms men, because boys are harmed by having this role model of a hard, tough, disconnected male that they have to emulate, they'll be dispossessed, so we have these hard, tough, disconnected males, and that's a devastating force on planet Earth. And we have this basically warlike patriarchal society emerging in the Eastern Mediterranean region, and then spreading and destroying more peaceful societies that were more plant-based and were less herding-based. And we see that happening through the northern Mediterranean and into Central Asia and into Europe. And then, of course, in Europe, they really spread from there. And when they came to the United, to say here in North America, they brought what the Indians called their slave animals with them, and the whole
Mm.
idea of enslaving animals. And that's spread up throughout the entire planet, you know. And as I say, it's still spreading right this second through McDonald's and Burger King and Cargill and Kentucky Fried Chicken and Monsanto, or now Bayer. This whole, I call it the military, industrial, meat, medical, pharmaceutical, media, banking complex. We have this complex that just works great to just make a lot of meat and dairy and eggs, a lot of medication,
Medicine.
a lot
Yeah.
of war, and you know, and it just sucks the wealth and the resources into a tiny elite. So it works very well to just keep the power in the hands of a few. But for those of us who are not in the 1/100th of 1% of the population, it's not in our best interest to be eating animal foods, because we're just giving away our money and our power to the same kings that started this thing off 10,000 years ago or 8,000 years ago, whenever it really got going. And that same system is in place. And now, unfortunately, with computer systems and everything else and surveillance systems, we have to realize that that mentality of materialism and commodification of life and exploiting other beings and turning animals into livestock, it's being turned right toward us. And if we're eating animal foods, we're basically feeding that system, and we'll become livestock ourselves. So it's really now, I think now is so urgent to spread the vegan message, to give, you know, the basic spiritual teaching of all religions is get what you want, give that to others, right? If we want to be free, give that to others. If we want to have, you know, let animals be free, if we want freedom and happiness and health for ourselves.